Audio made possible by www.jackettomee.com. Audio Fanfiction Productions presents Wide Awake. Fanfiction written by Angskata003. Fanfiction inspired by the Twilight Saga written by Stephanie Meyer. Chapter 13. Black Leather Ladyfingers. Bella's point of view. Edward kissed me, and not just a little peck either. Full out, tongues and panting. And even a groan at the end. And even though I have no basis for comparison, I'm inclined to agree with Jessica fucking fantastic kisser. I know it was a pity kiss. And I'd be lying more than a little bit if I said I wasn't steering him in that direction. Maybe it was wrong of me to do it, but I can't seem to care. When he agreed, I was still kind of shocked. He just had a look of determination on his face. He was going to give me something that no one else probably could. It was the sweetest thing he's ever done. I was nervous walking over to bed and climbing to him. I was wondering if I would be bad at it, and I really didn't want the humiliation of Edward thinking I was a bad kisser. But once he touched me, I was completely relaxed, and it all felt natural. Just instinct and his electricity. The little kisses were amazing. But I couldn't help myself, I wanted more. I broke the rule of taking what I could get. He didn't seem to mind. And his tongue was divine against mine. I felt parts of my body tingle that I didn't even know existed. I wanted him to feel the same way I was feeling. If just for one moment. So I broke the rule again, and pressed my body to him. And I felt it. I felt the excitement and brief flash of lust in his kiss. And then I heard it. That groan would be echoing in the deepest recesses of my memory for years to come. It didn't matter that he pulled away before he could feel more. It gave me hope. Hope that maybe someday Edward could feel that about me for more than just a few seconds. I went to bed with the stupidest smile on my face, and I didn't even try to hide it from Edward. Because I couldn't. I'd show him every part of me that loved that kiss. And when he was finally under the covers and pressed up against me, all the lust was gone, but my smile never went away. I didn't even have it in me to hate the alarm clock when it went off the next morning. But I gave Edward the usual squeeze, because I was still tired, and I didn't want to leave his arms. He still pulled away with a groan that was very unlike the one during the kiss, but it still stirred the memory and made me lick my lips by instinct. I went through my morning routine as normal as possible. I didn't want to make it weird for Edward by acting any differently. But once I closed the door to the bathroom, I let my face break out into the goofy grin again as I got dressed. Once I was packed, I felt the need to leave the cookies on the table, and then realized I had already given them to him the night before. Fudge-you-alls. It really didn't sum my day up. I really wanted to name them I Hate Jessica Stanley and all her slutty friends for making me feel so crappy in an underfunded gym locker room cookies, but something told me the Ziploc bag wasn't big enough. I was very happy that I never let her see me cry yesterday. I waited for her to stop fuming and walk out of the locker room with a huff before I let the tears take me. Jessica Stanley would never get the satisfaction of seeing it. Edward was still lying in bed with his eyes closed, running his fingers through his messy hair drowsily just like he did every morning. As I drew my hood up and slung the bag on my back, I had my back to him, walking to the door, in silence just like we always did when his voice stopped me.
Hey.
He called thickly through his morning sleep voice that I rarely heard. I turned my head to see him propped up on one forearm, running his other hand through his hair still. His droopy green eyes narrowed at me.
Don't you ever let that bitch get to you, Bella,
he said in a hard voice. I nodded at him once and smiled a little. I didn't care what she or her friends thought of me, and then his face broke out into a wry smirk.
Plus,
he shrugged.
Stanley doesn't have shit on you when it comes to kissing.
Then he flopped back down onto the bed and rolled over. And that morning, I really did skip across the yard on the way home. Nothing could ruin my mood. Not even Alice and her pouting about the Cullen House party this weekend. In fact, it just made my mood even better. Because I was going to tell Edward to make sure Jasper came this time around, and I was going to make sure she wore green. I spent the whole ride to school trying to fight off migraine at the thought of it. It really was quite ridiculous, this whole disturbing dance they were doing. Of course, I'd be a complete hypocrite to say anything, seeing as how I was head over heels for Edward, and much like Alice, just couldn't tell him. Albeit for much different reasons. Alice was always waiting on Jasper. Just sitting by and waiting for him to make some indication that he noticed her. They were in polar opposite cliques, if you could even call Jasper and Edward a clique. Our situations were so similar, and yet so different at the same time. At least for Alice and Jasper, the only things holding them back were themselves. It wasn't unrequited like I was with Edward. But at the same time, Edward and I were far closer than Alice and Jasper had ever been. It was all very confusing. And all the confusion just solidified the fact that I was finally feeling like a real teenage girl for once. When we got to school, I didn't look at Edward getting out of his Volvo. No way would I be able to hide my smile. And really, I couldn't stand looking at the Volvo at all, in fear of a much different reaction. Likely, vomit would be involved. Once we were out of the car and walking across the quad, I heard a very distinct snicker coming from the group in front of us. I lifted my hooded head just enough to see the legs of Jessica and her slut posse. And instead of just walking by with my hood up and my head down like I always did, I took Edward's advice. I wasn't going to let that bitch get to me, so I lifted my chin, and rounded my shoulders, and sent her the cheekiest smile I could muster. She glared, and she glowered, and she shot more daggers at me than was entirely necessary, but she kept her mouth shut. I had to battle with the urge to stick my tongue out at her like a 4-year-old as I passed. I heard a very familiar quiet chuckle from far behind me. Edward. It just made me smile wider at her. He was watching. He was amused. He liked me better. My entire day was good like that. By lunch, Jessica and her group had ceased all acknowledgement of my existence. I suppose I had lost my luster. Which suited me just fine. Edward was fine in biology. No more notes, no glares, just sketching. And looking bored as always. I couldn't wait for 10 o'clock. So I spent gin working to distance myself like always, hood up, head down. Jessica never passed me the basketball. Alice was planning another Make Jasper drool outfit when we got home. I, of course, pointed her towards every green number in her closet. And then she found it. I was sitting on her bed, laying on my back, and staring at the ceiling. Wishing I was in a very different bedroom. So, Alice bounced out of her closet with a smirk. I figure, I've been going about this all wrong. She shook her little head vehemently with her hands on her hips. I turned my head towards her and quirked an eyebrow. You think? She rolled her eyes. I mean, she hopped on the bed beside me, making me jump a bit. Jasper's a bad boy. Maybe I need to indulge in the naughtier side of my wardrobe. She wiggled her eyebrows. I looked at her mischievous grin closely, and then slowly sat up on the bed with a skeptical look on my face. Could she get any naughtier? She could. She would. She did. 5 minutes later, Alice came dashing out of her walk-in closet in the outfit I knew was going to break Jasper. It would probably break every male in Forks High. And possibly a few females too. My jaw was in serious danger of unhinging if it got any lower to the ground. Because there Alice stood, in black leather pants, so tight they looked like they were painted on, and hanging so low on her hips I was surprised there wasn't pubic hair showing. I watched her while she did a little spin for me, and even I felt like I was molesting her seeing it. Alice. I choked, gaping at the black leather incredulously. You can't be serious. I shook my head with my mouth still hanging open. Please. She scoffed, and waved her little hand. Then she raised her eyebrows and pointed at her leg. Is nothing, my dear sweet virginal Bella. She sang, doing another little spin in the mirror with a triumphant smile. I was still gaping,